Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to some more Warpforge. And today I'm bringing you my Insane Jain build, and I'm hot off a big run with her from like 2700. As you can see, we dropped a couple games at the end here, but ending probably 3100-ish. I'll probably play a little bit more in the last 2 days of this ranked season. We're sitting at 31-ish, I think, on the ladder, 32. And so that should net me a top 50 finish for the season. And even though this has been, I would say, a reasonably frustrating season from the standpoint of Sisters of Battle and the fact that Dark Angels did come on the scene and become, especially with Azriel, like one of the tier 1 decks, the top 2 decks. It's really pushed out everything else. As you saw, I put out a Gordrang video. I think he is very high up on tier 2. I think if you're not playing those decks, he is a great option. But I think where Jain is better is that Gordrang has 2 counters, which is Jain and Erica. And I think Jain really not having necessarily counters and just being able to be this kind of aggro control deck, though I think doesn't play the control role as well as Gordrang can with Will of Gork, with all the healing. But I still think she is definitely viable in tier 2, as I had sort of like theory crafted in earlier videos at the end of the season. But I wanted to test it, and so we're going to look at 2 Azriel matchups, 1 loss, 1 win, both very close. And we're going to take a look up just being able to beat one of the top players, Lionel, in an Erica matchup, which I think generally is pretty decent for us. I think we struggle more with Junith because she just truly puts out an incredible amount of board presence and pressure. But I also just want to talk about in these Azriel matchups specifically how close it can be, that it is winnable for Jain, that you can shut down that card draw, or not the card draw, but the deck manipulation from Azriel, and that does net you something. And so if anything, this will maybe give people a little bit of a guide on not just really how to build Jain, because I think we've had these builds around for a little bit. Maybe there's 1 or 2 slots we can talk about. But can she still be played, especially if people do have her and want to play her? And I think the answer is, I mean, minimum I would say 3,100, probably 3,200 you could get with her. Past that, it's probably a little tougher. But before I get into all that, I'm already talking my head off here. Thank you so much for your support on the channel. We are getting closer and closer to 900, which is closer and closer to that 1K subscriber goal. So please feel free to subscribe if you like what you're seeing and want to see more. So you can also hit that little bell. But enough of that. Let's get into why Jain is still somewhat insane. Okay, so Jain has been on an interesting journey. She was released without this passive stun ability, and then quickly was changed to have this passive damage to her son, which was 2 damage, and that was far too much. He had Banshee's Mask sitting for 5. It was just way too crazy. That was a pretty rough point in the meta, but there was a very quick, almost like a hot fix for it. I think there actually was. Within a week or so, she got addressed. Now she's dealing 1 damage on anything that stuns. And that may seem small, but it actually changes the math on a bunch of other things, and we'll get into that. But other than that, very normal Warlord, and her ability, Storm of Silence, is very powerful and interesting in the fact that it's modal, right? So essentially, in a vacuum, you get to choose either to beat down and hit for 4 by giving her +2 melee that turn, or stunning something and it receives 1 damage from the stun. So you can see how 2 damage was crazy, right? Because you would just spam the stun, although you still tend to do that as a play pattern with her. But you're not only stunning them, but they're just taking 2 damage for free, right? You don't even have to trade on them. So that was crazy. Really what this basically lets you choose between is, would you like to hit for 4 and not stun them? Or would you like to hit potentially for 3 if you want to beat with your Warlord and stun them and deal 1 damage? Most of the time, and I think especially to Azriel, just to kind of preview that matchup, we want to stop them from manipulating their library. If we can get them to brick and their units are not as strong and they're not getting as much upfront value, looking at you, Terminators and Teleporters, I think Jain actually can control the board fairly well with this build. And out of, I think, all of the aggressive warlords, she has the least bad matchups in terms of Eldar aggressive warlords. And I think she's able to push the most damage out of nowhere because she's got all of this extra damage tacked on to stuns that you run in the list. So I think Jain is not as insane as she used to be in terms of being very, very good. But I do think she is still solidly a tier 2 option. And, don't sleep on her. And I think if you like playing her or you're looking for a reason to play her, this is basically my 4th Warlord and my 4th faction that I've been playing a bit this season, really the last week and a half of the season. And I think that she's still worth something. And the Azriel matchups feel very skillful and tough, but winnable. So let's get into the build. So what is Jain bringing to the table? I'm going to start off with the first card and say that I'm not sure this card should be in this deck anymore. And the reason being is that we might need some heavy hitters against Azriel. We might need maybe just different utility into Sisters of Battle. And of course, all of this may change depending on the balance patch. I think if the top factions, whether it's Azriel or Sisters of Battle in particular, Junith and Azriel, see some sort of changes, then I think Jain actually might be able to compete even more. So we'll start with the 1-drop I'm actually not too sure of. I used to love running 2 of this when you were in a much more kind of aggressive meta where you're not going to get bodied out by other people's units so quickly that we do in the meta now, with Junith deploying just a boatload of value very early, as early as turn 4 or energy 4, and the same thing with Azriel. So this could be a Fire Prism. It could be the 2-drop Warlock that buffs all of your units' range attack and health. It could be a lot of things, but I actually still have found it useful as an annoying thing that I can stun them, and then they're going to have to remove some other way, and sometimes they can't, so it hits for 4. Or it can clear a unit for free, and we get a little bit of utility there. I think I just like it still as just a little cheap guy that I can probably get a stone out of and a little bit of damage, maybe a little bit more than that. But I would not fault you for saying, Tim, this card's not cutting it anymore. I need another Fire Prism. I need, maybe the proactive 5-drop that can potentially buff things, the Epic, but I'm not running that. So that's just kind of my 5 cents on how you could change that card. Craftworld Convergence, not going to say much. This card's excellent. It has 3 relevant modes. I would say most of the time you're choosing between draw 2 and 2 Spirit Stones, and I would say 75% of the time you're choosing to draw. It really allows her to keep going as this sort of aggro control build, and is just an excellent needed card. Ranger, I've gone back and forth on running 2 versus 1. I still think this card pulls its weight. It's not great into Chaos. It's not good into anything that has that little bit of AoE clear that's pretty easy, like Blast and things like that. So it's not great into Ultramarines or specifically Titus. But I still think it's just a great annoying option. And some of the skill expression in playing this card is knowing that how it can mess up your opponent's tempo. So you can play this on an empty board, and then they have to go, well, I don't want to run out my 3-drop into this that's probably going to die. So you get a little bit of advantage there, or you get to drop it on a board that's already established, and it sort of incentivizes them to like aggressively trade, or maybe break up the play pattern that they would like. So knowing when to play Ranger and when not to is definitely something you need to know. Windrider, just excellent, efficient, going to do what it needs to do, and the fact that it benefits from one of the newer cards, and we'll skip ahead here a little bit, Shining Spear Exarch, giving it Shuriken 3 on 6 energy. You play this guy, then you play the Windrunner. Is just a Windrider that is just a really nice little combo that allows you to clear things out. Shuriken 3 is noticeable. Once you get into 3 and 4, you're really clearing things, potentially for free, or trading up, very noticeably. Playing 2 Banshee's Mask, of course, this is hitting for 4 because of Jain. And I would say 99% of the time, you want to point this at your opponent's face. 4 damage to face for 3 and a stun. Let's say we're on 5 energy. You play this, you pump your Warlord to hit for 4. They're already stunned, so you're not getting the value from the stun. You get to hit them for 8. 8 points of life, right, in that 5 energy swing. So that's why Banshee's Mask is going to be there. Shroud Runner, we'd probably be running the other 3-drop, flanker if we ran ways to generate stones, but we don't. And so that's why we run Shroud Runner. This card is still very annoying, the fact that it has Sniper, you stun them, then they're like, oh god, I gotta use something else to try and clear that, because if I play something, then I'm not getting rid of it. It's still just doing exactly what it needs to do, which is controlling the board. And Striking Scorpion, ever since this thing got 3 health, patches and patches and patches ago, it's become much more relevant and just a staple. You're living the dream if you get to hit for 4 and then hit for another 4. You can see how the damage adds up so quickly in this deck if you're able to get the right set of circumstances. And that's what we need. I still really like, and I know some people run Fire and Fade in these builds, I feel like that can be a bit of a trap. I feel like you need a good amount of card advantage in this deck to keep going and competing against the decks that tend to go late or that push you toward the late game. I still really advocate for 1 copy of that. Dance of Death, this thing is how you win against Azriel. It's also probably how you win against any sort of slower Warlord or playstyle. The fact that you can hit their face for 6 if you choose not to stun them and use your ability to pump +2 and then +2 from Dance of Death and 2 from your own Warlord is how you swing the tide of battle. And you'll see in, I think, at least 1 or 2 of these wins that we've got Dance of Death rolling as soon as possible when it makes sense. So yeah, this is actually probably the #1 legendary. I know people ask, what do you craft? A lot of the time, and Dance of Death is insane. Eldritch Storm, we're still going to play it. We still got ways to generate stones. Thankfully, and luckily, with our Craftworld Convergence, these are just perfect together. The fact that this can burn, and I think in a couple games today, burn my opponent for 5 when I needed it because I couldn't get through Vanguard. It does what you need to, right? It's a better Storm Raven or Storm of Fire, whatever it's called, Storm Raven. That deals 2 to everything. This can deal potentially 6 to everything if you roll double 3 for 4 energy. So, Howling Banshee, just bread and butter, one of my favorite cards, favorite rares in the game. So it gets to ping something with its stun when you get to play with Jain. It flanks. You're going to get that Waystone. You're going to get to punch something. Often what I'll do, and you'll see me do this in some of these games, I'll 50-50 my stun if I want to stun 2 targets. Make sure that the one lands, and then Howling Banshee will help me land the other one. And it just always pulls its weight. Nuadhu Fireheart, this thing can go off in certain matchups, not as good in others, but it's still just a very efficient legendary flying vehicle that punches pretty hard, especially in a lot of flyers don't typically have 5 melee. And the fact that this strike ability allows for all of your other flanking units, or rather, I would say the adjacent ones, to get invulnerable is obviously a boatload of value. Speaking of a boatload of value, this little 4-drop is just excellent, right? It's a good body for a flanker, and the fact that it can give Shuriken to your other cheap things with Sniper, things that already have Shuriken, you're just putting icing on the cake. And so Shining Spear Exarch is just an absolute must-have. Another buff to this deck that I've just loved is Hornet. This thing being able to go face for 5 is just exactly what this deck needs. And I will say, particularly into Dark Angels, they don't have a ton of units that are like weighted towards ranged, aside from the flankers that usually come down early. So I shouldn't say that many. They have some. But what I've loved with this is punching into, these kind of ground armored units, right? So speaking of like Deathwing Terminator, right, the 4-drop, this thing does really help you clean up. And if you can play it on 5 and you know you're not going to get the stones for quite a while, use it, right? And sometimes they even they don't have any AoE damage to clear it out, and they're going to take 5 anyway. So Hornet, excellent. Striking Scorpion, Exarch. Again, if this thing lives, it's punching for 8, right? And sometimes you live the dream, and I think I did earlier today where I got to Nuadhu after this was set up, give this invulnerable, hit for 8. And it just is absolutely incredible. Crimson Hunter still really pulls its weight. Obviously still good into the Talon Master coming out from the Dark Angels, being able to remove it by itself. It is still just a very efficient flying unit that is going to be problematic for your opponent. Fire Prism. Why do we want more of this? Potentially more 7-drops, and I think it's a little sketchy, and that's why I'm not doing it, is armor, right? The armor clause on this is actually super, super relevant into Dark Angels, because if you can ping something down to 2 health, 1 health with this thing, right? Thinking about the Strike Master that comes in on 6. Fire Prism just helps you get most of the way there. And even though its health kind of sucks and it's pretty easy to clear, this thing does provide quite a bit of utility into armored units, which Dark Angels have quite a bit of. So I wouldn't fault you for running another Fire Prism. I do think that that could be a decent adaptation. The only reason I don't is because I just think if I were to run 3 7-drops, I'm kind of stretching it. It's possible I should even look at Hemlock Wraithfighter again, but I think in this build, Fire Prism might make more sense because I could still take advantage of the 3 damage to face. And against orcs, you actually can cash in a little bit more if they have the Scarboy on. So Fire Prism does deserve a spot. I also think, I still don't know how to pronounce her name, but the Huntress also deserves a spot. I didn't used to think so. I thought that I liked more of the tempo aggro version without her. She still is a super problematic unit. Sorry, I thought someone was knocking on my door. She's got 7 health. She's got good stats in the air. You can't really cheat on her in terms of the damage. She's got concussive, right? So, like, even if they clear her, they're going to take some amount of damage from her. And the fact that if you can combo this with your ability the same turn, so on 9 energy or 10 energy, which I did in a game today where I played Banshee's Mask, right? That's Banshee's Mask is hitting for 7 because it's 3 plus the 1 from my passive plus the 3 from the Huntress. So I still think she's actually pretty big house of a unit. And the fact that she's flying means that Dark Angels in particular will struggle with her a little bit more. And then, of course, Wailing Doom, this is what you want to see in your hand in the late game. This is what you're trying to work toward the entire game. You're trying to set up lethal with Wailing Doom without, dying yourself. So that is the deck. And like I said, there's a little bit of wiggle room here. I think you could cut this defender, add a Fire Prism. You could think about, maybe some of the other 5-drops that are in here because, you don't have a ton of proactivity here just beside the Hornets or flanks, so you're usually not trying to run them out. You really just have the Exarch. And I tend to look at curves, especially when I'm trying to optimize, as is there a spot in the curve that is just a little weak? But I think when you run a lower curve version of Jain, which I think is what most people have run, it makes sense, right? Because you just want to be using Jain's ability most of the time. So it's enough talking from me. Obviously, I'm excited because I had a pretty nice run with her today. So let's take a look at these games. All right, we're going to kick it off here against the Lizard King Edge himself. We've been sparring either on Warshaper, and now it looks like he's joined the Azriel team. And so here, we're just going to be pretty happy with like a lower curve hand. I could keep the Crimson Hunter. I don't think keeping this in your opening hand is that bad, but I usually just go for, like, I'd like to see a Banshee here or a Banshee's Mask, something that's kind of proactive and helps me control the board. And they choose to take Blackout, and honestly, this scares the heck out of me, right? Because their troops being cheaper is pretty scary. I will say the 2 matches I played against Lizard King Edge today, I feel like Jain, or at least my build, made a little bit better use of it. But you can tell me in the comments, what you think of taking Blackout in this matchup. So here I'm just saying, okay, maybe I could see a 3-drop that I could play ahead of curve, and I take Kelinaris because it's a really beefy unit, right? It's got huge stats, and so here I'm just going to work on taking out the Raven Wing, which is pretty annoying, so I have to trade some health to do that. And I choose to play out the defender because I've got 2 annoying threats. They're not stunned, so they are going to get to potentially clear this. But yeah, just kind of take it as like, okay, I'm up tempo a little bit. And so they play this, right? And I'm going to be able to clear this no problem. So that's where the Ancient Reliquary comes from. And I don't really run that in my Azriel list, but it is annoying because I'm going to have to chew through this health quite a bit. But we get to pick up a stone, which will probably be relevant later. And here I'm just going to opt for the Exarch to get us closer to clearing this. And I choose to trade a little bit of health here too, just to have this Windrider still here. I don't know if that's the best play, right? This is going to get Unwavering Zealed pretty easily. Or they've got the Terminator, which is perfect, just to clear everything out here. And I wouldn't fool you for like looking at this game state and being like, how are you supposed to win this? But let's just see how and if we can get there. So here I'm just going to go for, all right, let me draw some cards. Let me see what I can work with. And I just go for the Striking Scorpion. And I just sit here. Because I'm definitely in trouble. I should not be trading my health at this point. I just got to hope that they don't have a huge follow-up. And it turns out that Lizard King Edge does not. So chooses to look. And I think, I'll just pause here for a second. I think in almost every board state, which sounds kind of crazy, you should be using Azriel's ability. Because the value that you get from this is just so immense from all the teleporters and fixing your draws because you don't have a ton of card draw. Even if, like, I have one of the draw two in my deck because I think it does help. The value of this ability is a lot higher than you might think. And so stunning it is actually going to be very relevant when and if we're able to do that. And I think here you could easily say, oh, I'm ahead on board. I'm going to trade my health. I would say don't do that. I would say fix your draws, make sure the top of your deck is exactly what you need, and make them have to play aggressively to you. I think that's really what I would be doing. So, of course, Lizard King is doing exactly what we think. Beats us down there. So we're just thankful that we didn't have to face a 5 or 6 drop that turn, right? If they played Strike Master afterward, it's a lot scarier. But the Banshee is able to take out the Deathwing Terminator, which is nice. We get the hit. And now we're going to start stunning. Because it also gives us another bite at the apple with this Striking Scorpion, right? Remember I said, if I can get 8 damage out of this card, like, that's how we're winning the game. And here I say, okay, well, I'm sort of back to the board state being okay, I'm going to hit. And there comes the Strike Master to ruin my day. But we're actually able to play on curve here and keep things rolling. So this Fire Prism is going to chew up the Strike Master pretty much by itself. And we're going to use our lovely Shuriken to get past that last 2 health on the armored unit. And I choose not to hit here. Right? I'm down health, and I say to myself, you know what? I'm not going to hit until I really feel like I can start, pushing my advantage towards this Wailing Doom. You can tell me if you disagree with that. I think I play attacking turn to turn and decide if I want to trade health here or if I don't. That's just kind of my play style. So here, basically every turn, you just want to, the formula is, how do I get this problematic unit off the board? And keep going. So this is what we do. What's nice is because we've got the damage from her passive, we get to ping off the shield, and rally abilities go through camo. And so this is perfect, right? So I'm able to put 2 units on the board, unless they have Wavering Zeal, and I choose to attack there, right? Because I've started to get a board going. And if they don't have a way to clear this, this is going to hurt a lot. So I'm happy to see they're spending 2 energy to do that, which means they don't have a ton of important stuff to do here. And they do get the Terminator, which is nice. It is able to clear out that Fire Prism very easily. But the board isn't, uncontrollable, right? And so here I'm just going to take the time to clear out this Deathwing Terminator. Going to pick up that stone. I am going to clear out the 2-drop. And then I get to go Striking Scorpion and stun them again. And just keep Lizard King off of being able to manipulate the top of their library whenever I can afford to. And the 1 damage is relevant, right? I mean, every time I'm doing this, it's a free damage to their face. That I just pay 2 energy to stun them as well. So again, don't have to fear a 9-drop, thank God. But there's Sammy, which is pretty scary. But I will say, I think we were able to take advantage of, somewhat of a weak draw from Lizard King. But you still have to play it tight, right? We're still behind life by 11 here. And there's a couple different ways you can do this, but I choose to play it this way, which is softening it up so that my sniper is relevant here. And then we're going to punch in for 4 because it is going to die to that. And I'm going to choose to attack here too, I believe. Because again, now we're really working towards this Wailing Doom. If they take one, like maybe one of the Raven, the Crimson Hunter, I don't know why I want to call this Raven, Crimson Hunter hits, then we're in a good spot. But they get the Dark Talon off of the Samael, and that's actually such a great, such a great card for this situation. Gets to stun the Crimson Hunter. Oh, it's because I'm playing so much Dark Angels. That's why Raven Wing is in my head. So here, I think there are a couple different lines. What I am playing around at this point is the 9-drop, right? If the 9-drop comes in and their Warlord can attack and anything on their board can attack, I'm dead. Right? That's probably the best late game option for them. And so that's all I'm thinking about is I need to clear this board and keep him stunned. Right? And so as much as I would love to Wailing Doom here, and then yes, we could blast, but then we gamble the Storm of Silence, right? And then maybe we can clear. Instead, I just have to take my free clear and sword here, and then get the guaranteed stun, and just hope that I can keep whittling down their life total. Oh, I actually hit there. Okay, I did something different than I thought. So we do still get the blast 4, which is nice. I stun. And then I think I cash in the 3 damage. I guess that's because I know that I can't die at 6. I think it's close there, right? I only take 2 on that hit, whereas I would take 3 if I was hitting. So, all right, there's the Strike Master. So buff up to 10. And there's the Deathwing Champion that unfortunately they did not get the teleport for. So it's what's crazy about this game is I actually didn't think about the 7-drop because I don't play it in my Azriel build, and I could have just been dead to that. But thankfully we were able to get there. So you can see how close these games could be. So let's get into the next one, which is also Azriel. Okay, so here's our second Azriel game. And I ended up going 3-2 over 5 games today. So very small sample size, but definitely getting a bit more of a feel for the matchup. And even though I like Shining Spear, I throw it back, just saying that, okay, let's go with, let's try and find something else, maybe curve out with a 3-drop, get the Scorpion, which is really nice. Haven't played against this player, but I just know into Azriel, these games are going to be tough. So we're on the play. I think that Jain should be favored going first because, hypothetically speaking, we get to shut down their deck manipulation for as long as possible going on the play. So we shut down the first one. They get Agenda with this Raven Wing Bike. And they're able to get a secret in their deck, which is pretty nice. More chances to draw it later. And here, just the most energy efficient thing is to just drop the Scorpion, and then I'll trade some health into the Raven Wing so that we can kind of clear it next turn and keep on trucking. So they're going to get to look here. They're not going to have the ability to stun them. They've got a nice follow-up with the Librarian, although Shuriken kind of helps us out a little bit. And they're going to go for the Agenda point, which I think is correct. No reason to trade it away, really, because I have to clear it anyway. And here, I decide, okay, pause for a sec. There's a couple things I can do, right? But I could just run out the Exarch. I could bop this off, use the Exarch to clear this for free. I think it's close. The reason I take this line is because whenever I can use my ability to really provide some utility, that's good card advantage. So we have it, whether we hit here or here, I would be happy. We happen to hit the 33% chance, and unfortunately we get I think a little bit punished for that because now we have to spend our turn clearing this, and so the Raven Wing Bike gets to stick around, And so it's possible that I should have just run the Shining Spear out instead. But I wanted to take a good chance. I had a 66% shot to hit something I wanted to. And unfortunately, we missed it. So they're going to get the trade there. They got to Inner Circle, so they effectively got to manipulate their library this turn, even though I have them stunned. And so they've gotten to do that twice. And whenever I see Inner Circle, I'm a bit afraid, because it just makes things scary when you're on 4 or 5, 6 energy. So here I'm going to get the free snipe, of course, just good value. We're going to definitely just stun whenever we can. I really think this is the way to play the matchup. You know, we could be rushing face and gambling that they don't hit what they're supposed to or what they're trying to, but I don't think that that's a good strategy. Okay, here we see the Ravenwing Ancients, which is fine. I'd rather see that than some big old Strike Master or something. So we don't mind that. But I should have been thinking about what is the card that got discounted, and this is not it. And I don't know that it would have changed my play too much. But here I basically say, you know what, I'm going to build a really good board and hope that you just don't have a way to interact. I'm not going to play around what happens here, but I think I should have thought a little bit harder about this line. So what did they get? A discounted Deadly Hunters, which is just so good into our very low attack shuriken units, because they just get to clear out everything. And they get the strike slay abilities. Sorry for my voice. But luckily, we do have 2 stones, and we've got Eldritch Storm, because otherwise this game wouldn't be over, but it would be bad. And they get to strike also on the stones, so it's just... or slay, rather. It's so brutal. So here, I could trade some health, I could do some other things, but I just want to draw cards and see what the plan is. And so I just go for the Eldritch Storm, because I know this will, for the most part, solve my issues here. And we actually rolled like a 2 or 3 on everything. We roll 5 damage on Azriel, so not the worst. And I'll just run out the Guardian Defender because I've got the energy to do it. Means that something's got to attack this, and that's pretty good for us. See, another Ezekiel, which is always a pretty obnoxious unit to deal with. And I'm just thinking to myself, how do I get this Hornet to be useful? Because we're so far away from stones, we needed to draw cards there, and there's no way it's going to hit face. And so, hoping that I can, I opt for this line to take out Ezekiel, keep the board at parity, but we're not stunning, so they're going to get to see what they want to see. And they also get this teleport here, which is just not good for us. Eldar have a decent time of taking this guy out, though, I will say. But still, getting the free 5 damage is not nothing. But I am grateful that it's just this unit that we have to face. So here's where this Fire Prism can shine a little bit. Alright, just get to take that out. I get to stun to try and shut off their ability to get those powerful teleport units on curve. And we're going to trade health because we got to just try and put on the gas, especially if Fire Prism isn't able to be cleared. So there's the Wavering Zeal, Unwavering Zeal. And they have to trade a spear for this. So I'm pretty happy about this. We're still down 10 health, but to me, if they end their turn where they have nothing on board, that's obviously very good for us. And so here we just put the pedal to the metal and hope we can get there. We're going to go for the Banshee's Mask, which hits for 4. We're going to Dance of Death. And we're going to pump ourselves and just go for as max damage as possible to make sure that we can close out the game potentially next turn. We can't really worry about whatever teleport units they'll have. We've shut off their draw as much as possible. But we just have to try and end it like basically now. And so they've got the Terminator teleport off the top, unfortunately. And that's pretty much almost always going to seal the deal here. But we do draw a Banshee's Mask. And so here, I know that I can stun 2 targets, and that's exactly what I need. So this is what I was talking about like really using your Storm of Silence well. So I can't attack anything because I'll die, so I get to clear that. I go for Storm of Silence first, see where the stun lands. Great, we stun there. I play Howling Banshee, I stun here, and as long as I'm not dead and you don't remove my units, I should win the game. So this, I mean, obviously an extremely close game here. So when I see this, I know I'm dead. Even though I was a little confused at playing out these other cards here. I guess they were trying to have some fun. I don't know, getting a mission done. Because obviously I'm dead to Unwavering Zeal. So, and they play 2 in their list. I usually only play 1. So I also was kind of trying to push forward with that knowledge and not too concerned. But also I played fine until the Deathwing Terminator Part 2 got me. So that was pretty rough. So yeah, that's how you can lose. Obviously it's tough, but I think we played that really tight. And you can see how you actually can fight during the game. So let's get to game 3. And for our last game, we're going to go against Lionel Johnson, the number 2 player right now, fighting for that number 1. Playing Erica. So pretty much try not to let them accumulate faith, play for the board. Generally, I think I like this matchup. And so just going to throw back some of the 4 drops. Banshee's great. Dance of Death can be really bad in this matchup. Probably should have mulliganed away. Honestly, I think that was a bit of a misplay. Because once I get stunned, I can't use it. So you'll see me hold this for a long time. Especially with the start that they have. So here, it's going to be pretty scripted. We're just going to pump to 4 damage. Like good old Gore Drain. Then we're just going to prioritize taking out the units. Until we can use our flankers to do that for us. So they're going to get 1 faith pretty easily there. Got another good follow-up here. Just going to take most of my turn to clear. So they're going to go 2 faith. And you just don't want them snowballing an early board, right? Because that's disaster, especially if a Rhino comes down. So here we just hit. We use our sniper. Get strangled by the serpent. But now up to 2 faith and relics. So really good curve for Lionel. Goes to 6 immediately, which turns on every part of Erica's ability. Right. So deals the additional 2, so it's dealing 3, and it's stunning the target. And so I just know that this is going to be a bit of an uphill battle. But you got to persevere if you want to defend the craft world, you know. So here I just say, all right, let me take another Banshee. Get some chip damage. Obviously, Sisters have access to a ton of really good range flankers, but I mean, I'm on 4 energy. I want to play a 4-drop, and I don't want to use Dance of Death. Because if I stick this on my Warlord, it's not going to be useful. So, and I would say generally, and I still think this Lionel's playing this correctly, I'm happy to see myself not get stunned. Because I can get so much utility between my ability and the fact that I'm not taking 3 damage a turn. So we're just going to do really easy, take the shield off. We're going to use Windrider, which, yes, will take a damage, but clears this out pretty well. We know that they could have the the Holy Fire to cleanse stuff, but there's not much we can do. And here, I'm going to take the time to Banshee's Mask to burn for 4 and stun them. So could have played out Striking Scorpion. There wasn't a really good way to position because either way it was kind of awkward. And so they get a nice Seraphim just really does so much work, especially when you get that extra bonus health and bonus ranged. So just going to finish off the Banshee, and we're kind of back to square one on the board for us. But we're up on life, and that's generally good in this matchup, I would say. And so we're just gonna keep, as you notice, like I'm barely thinking. I mean, the battle log always goes faster, but like I'm immediate. That's the first thing I'm do is like I'm gonna hit you with my Banshee's Mask, and not pay attention to this little birdie over here because I just need to burn you down. That is my main objective here. So they're gonna stun me, obviously, which sucks, and they can trade 5 damage on me as well, which is really good. And the life point lead that we had is, going. Interestingly, Lionel doesn't attack here. I mean, I get why, because it's pretty easy to mop this up, but now I get a free trade with the Crimson Hunter, which I would be thinking about. And I get to hit and take the shield off because of Shuriken. So the fact that I have plus 5 health here at 25 is definitely relevant. Not sure if that was just greedy or I don't know. I probably would have traded 5 there. But I don't know. Maybe that's not correct. All right, so here, just going to take as much control of the board while they establish their late game cards because they're at 7 Faith. 8 Faith is obviously one of the most important breakpoints for Sisters. So you really need to be mindful of that. So here I basically say I want to get the stun on both. I'm going to keep ignoring their units and just pressing forward. That's really what I want to do. So we get even a little bit of chip damage there. And then playing this out so that if it gets flamed here, it'll take this out. It'll damage. Or if we flame here, this is completely protected. And they go for Shrine World here, which is going to bump them up to 10. So now I know, I have to end this game. But we're in a pretty good position to do it, I will say. They haven't really been able to progress their board. And so I just got to make sure that I present lethal this turn or next turn. And I know that I can't do it this turn, unfortunately. And so here I'm just going to go for as big a hit as possible. And just to save both my Fire Prism and my Crimson Hunter for face damage because I can hit for 6, I can hit for 4. If I had done this in a different order, I could have dropped them to, I think it was 1 health or 2 health, which is not a big difference. 4 is still pretty much within range, and unfortunately, this is all that Lionel's got. And so he can clear out the board, but doesn't have any other energy to stop me from killing him. So I think we played that pretty well. There's kind of a question there if I should have just kind of gone all in on face. Yeah, managed to get there. So it's funny not to play Dance of Death, but I assure you, if you waste a turn doing that, you're never going to see your Warlord attack. To be fair, it would take pressure off your other units. But I just think that I don't know. It goes either way, but I think it is probably better to hold Dance of Death for potentially like a kill, or the way that I did it, where it's like, great, I can pump all this damage this turn, and this turn only, and then next turn, hopefully find lethal. And so we did. So yeah, just transitioning here into the closing thoughts. So that is my Insane Jain build. Again, I think there is room for flexibility. I think you could cut a defender. You could even move maybe a ranger, because sometimes these early game units are not terribly great into certain matchups. Like Shroud Runner, pretty bad into Gordrang, but good into a lot of other builds. So I wouldn't mess with this construction too much, but I think you have 1 to 3 flex spots in here, depending on what you're seeing. But I went 3-2 against Azriel today on ladder. The games were always very close. And I think if you really do prioritize shutting down their ability to set up teleporters and using like these particular flying units and flank units to really maximize on keeping the board under control and throwing your stuns around, especially with your ability plus the stuns that you get off of things like Howling Banshee, you can basically just kind of like Gordrang, ignore the units and just keep going face, right? And that it's the tough part is figuring out, when do I do that? When do I have to clear that unit? When do I have no choice? Or when do I have a choice and am I playing towards my outs? Which most cases in this deck are, Wailing Doom and Eldritch Storm, some of your best ways in the late game to burn your opponent out. So I still think that Jain, is viable. I think it's still really hard. But I do think the fact that I can kind of battle toe to toe, even though I have to obviously play it really, really tight in a lot of these games, and they're very, very close. Even my other loss as well was, I think they were on like 8 or 10 health, and I was on like 4 or 5. Like it's very, very close games where really it's like, did you draw your 9-drop that kills me, or did I draw my Wailing Doom that kills you? So I do think that this is viable. It's hard for me to say is it the top of tier 2 like I originally thought, because I think Gordrang, if you dodge Erica and Jain, Gordrang I think is better, especially, and I want to highlight this because I know other people have talked about it too. So I think it is pretty relevant. If you take a look at the Dark Angels Forge, something that is very relevant and we're working towards is Void Combat. This makes the Gordrang matchup so much harder as Dark Angels. And I think you could make the same argument of playing into other decks as well. Void Combat just means that you're almost hitting for 5 with Gordrang right out the gate, right? And I think that this makes Gordrang particularly good. And I think, as Jain playing into Dark Angels, right? That's also really good. So I think Void Combat is sort of the ticket, as I think people already noticed, like when I got ran over in a couple games by Gordrang. This is the ticket for aggro. This is what's going to allow you to really bully Dark Angels when you are on offense against them. So I know it sucks to have to rush to a 25 Forge card. Thank God it's not 40. Yeah, before I get on my rant about offense and defense cards, we'll close it out here. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much. Please consider subscribing and checking out other content I've got here or on Twitch. Yeah, thank you for the support. And as always, I will catch you guys next time.